Happy anally fisted dead birthday, Starfighters. If this video does not go up on Thanksgiving Day, that joke is going to make no sense. Anyway, The Last Leprechaun. According to this, filmed in 1998, but considering the track record with Paul Matthews movies, not just the ones that I've covered so far in this set, or actually I should say the one I've covered so far in the set, since this is only episode 2 of season 7. Like I've said before, I've seen a couple of reviews of Paul Matthews movies on Diamanda Hagen's channel. But yeah, the point is, the filming date on here is 1998, but it probably wasn't released until like 2000 or 2001. That tends to happen a lot to this guy's movies. But yeah, it's got like 3 actors I don't recognize and David Warner, who, like I said at the end of the last episode, is probably going to be too good for this. But yeah, let's just jump right into The Last Leprechaun.
Alright, so I have now watched The Last Leprechaun from 1998. Plot summary courtesy of IMDb. Ethel and Tommy Barrick are sent to Ireland to spend the summer with their new stepmother. Once there, they discover her to be an evil, power-seeking witch with real magical powers and a hatred for all things green. Okay, so it's not a Paul Matthews movie. The director's name is listed as David Lister?
Wait, are you trying to tell me everybody's dead? Should have never let him out in the first place.
Well, Paul Matthews did write it, though. Shit. As you may have gathered from the summary, after a movie that, to its credit, avoided the evil stepmother cliché, we are going to one that just leans right into it. Fun. So we open on David Warner doing a ritual of some sort. This scene is cool because David Warner just has one of those voices, you know? If you've never heard him as Ra's al Ghul on Batman the Animated Series, you're missing out. Sadly, it's pretty much downhill from here, because the second the Banshee he was summoning, which was what the ritual was for, bad comedy starts. So yeah, it's a Paul Matthews film, alright, even if he didn't direct it. But these are our villains for the piece. A wizard smart enough to know how to summon creatures, but not what to actually do with them, and a dollar store version of Rita Repulsa. Gods help us all. After this, we meet our title character as he is awoken by a Rube Goldbergian alarm clock. The design's pretty neat, I'll give it that. Once awake, he argues with rabbits while getting dressed. I don't actually know if it makes sense in context or if he's just mad. We do learn his name, though, Finn McCool. Almost sounds like a stage name for an Irish rapper. And yes, Ireland does have a rap scene. Fuck your Honda Civic, drive a horse outside. Fuck your Subaru, I have a horse outside. Anyway, back to the movie, and Finn's home starting to shake violently. He looks outside to see construction vehicles rolling by. His alarm clock had months on it instead of hours, so it's not that surprising when it's only now that he realizes how much of the forest he's lived in has been clear-cut. Oh joy, a movie with an environmental message. Ugh. Before anyone says anything, I'm myself an environmentalist. But the film industry is notorious for botching it when it tries to have pro-environment messages in movies. I mean, let me put it to you this way. Of all the late 80s, early 90s cartoons to have some form of comeback, notice how Captain Planet has never been among them. Finn decides to go visit a large house, factory, kind of hard to tell from the distance the movie shows it to us from. And he travels there by way of trebuchet. I am not kidding. And yet probably still better accommodations than Ryanair. Turns out it's a large house with an adjacent farm, cows and all. Shenanigans happen that aren't funny, yada yada. We meet a couple of regular humans named Ned and Mary, blah blah. Turns out they work with David Warner's character, a Mr. Simpson. The children from the summary arrive nearly 20 minutes into a 90-minute movie, and they see Finn after he nearly gets run over, though somehow the driver of the car doesn't notice. Now, here's where we get to a detail the summary left out, which I think is kind of important. the evil stepmother is not really a power-seeking witch. Her body was taken over by a power-seeking banshee. So it's wrong on 2 levels there. Also, it's implied that the marriage to their father happened after the possession, so there are Wonder Woman 1984 levels of unfortunate implications here. And we are yet to learn why the kid's father isn't there with them, and also why are they wearing school uniforms. These are American kids, so that would mean that they wore the school uniforms on the plane. Why? The kids' names are Tommy and Ethel, in case you forgot from the summary. We cut back to Finn sabotaging construction vehicles. Not to render them inoperable, though. That would be less, massive air quotes, funny. Much better to do it in a way that in real life would risk killing the operators than to do something more pragmatic, like just slashing the tires. Finn, you are doing direct action wrong, and I am deeply disappointed in you. The next day, the Banshee's stepmom shows up at the sabotage site and has the kids with her for some reason. Tommy finds a few small pieces of gold that Finn had dropped during his sabotage, and watching from a distance, he calls the kid a thief. Not how that works, but okay. And another deviation from the plot summary, as the Banshee refers to her wedding to their father as being a few months. When this summary, as well as a few others I looked at, referred to her as though she was already their step-parent. Also some dialogue earlier in the movie, which was why I'd referred to her as that as well. Finn follows the kids back to the house, and good gods, everyone in this movie has, no peripheral vision, I swear. They also all need to get their hearing checked, as I just cannot accept that none of the human characters notice Finn until Ethel unknowingly closes the window on his fingers. So yeah, this is the leprechaun and children getting to know and eventually like each other portion of the film. I admit I chuckled a little bit when Tommy made fun of Finn's mannerisms. Finn reveals the reason that he's the last leprechaun, and not only is it stupid, it's kind of weird that he doesn't seem too put out by it. In fact, I'm just going to go ahead and spoil this now. Him being the last leprechaun has no bearing on the plot whatsoever. He could have just been a leprechaun, and it would have changed absolutely nothing about the plot. Nothing. Nothing. I am serious. Not one thing. So apparently the deal is, the reason leprechauns are small is because of the weight of the gold that they own, both literally and metaphorically, because they keep some in their pockets. And when they don't have any, they grow. And grow. Until they grow so big they pop like balloons. Okay then. We get a scene after this where the Banshee is talking to Mr. Simpson, and man, I know I said David Warner was going to be too good for this movie, but really, Veronica Hamill is the MVP here. And it's not consistent, unfortunately, but when she goes full camp, she is easily the best part of this movie. This is a villain who deserved a better film to be the antagonist in, truly. I mean, we are talking Ursula levels of cool here. And I don't even like Disney's The Little Mermaid that much, but Ursula is iconic. Anyway, the kids see the Banshee in her true blue-haired, glitter-makeup and floating above the floor self, whilst trying to sneak Finn out of the house, and, let's just say they underreact and move on. Not enough of an underreaction to justify use of the MST3K doll surprise clip, but close. This leads to a chase sequence with the kids trying to hide from the Banshee after stepping on her foot, and there's a bit of a costuming gaffe here, as the film establishes that the Banshee hates green things, yet I feel pretty confident that the outfit she wears as she tracks Ethel and Tommy to one of the farm buildings is green. Oh, and now I know why. While trying to coax the children out of hiding, she says the line, "And you wouldn't like me when I'm angry." Of course they had to have her in green for that part. In a better movie, I might have found that funny. The kids get away briefly when Finn dumps a bag of white powder on her, insert obvious cocaine joke here, but are cornered barely a minute later by her and Mr. Simpson, and I have to say, this all seems to be a bit early in the movie. We are honestly still a good 7 minutes away from the halfway point here, but this all feels like end of Act 2, all is lost moment kind of stuff you generally get towards the end of a movie. And this is when Ethel and Tommy's father arrives, and understandably he doesn't believe them when they tell her their future stepmother is a witch. Especially since she isn't, she's a banshee. Look, the movie isn't interested in the difference, so somebody has to be. But yeah, not hard to guess how the rest of the movie before the climax will play out. The father will be oblivious to any obvious signs his fiancée is evil until the plot needs him to notice. Then there'll be one big happy family after the banshee is defeated, blah blah. Might make for a more interesting movie if he'd walked in on her threatening the kids with magic and then ends up a hostage for the kids and Finn to have to rescue. But I guess that would be too interesting. And sure, for an adult movie, buying that two prepubescents could pull off a hostage rescue when the hostage taker can use magic would be a bit much, but in a kid's movie, you can roll with it. Also, the movie drops a not-so-subtle hint that the father will end up with the maid, Mary, by the end. We also see the banshee spiking the father's drink here, and it's implied this is how they came to be engaged in the first place, and here we are again in the yikes department. I know villains using love potions in fiction is not a new thing, but once you reach the age where you realize what you're seeing is basically just a magical date rape drug, it's hard not to cringe at such things. And I remind you, this is also not the banshee's body. Or not her original body. So really, you've got two victims here. Accuse me of overthinking this all you want, but I assure you this is all popping into my head as I watch the movie. This isn't stuff that's occurring to me days or even weeks later. I'm not that kind of movie YouTuber. Like I keep saying, my show is initial reactions plus jokes. Also, I wasn't kidding when I said the father would be oblivious. He fails to notice his fiancée sparking like a broken light socket right in front of him. Though Mary doesn't seem to notice that either, so maybe they're just both stupid. I don't know. I mean, I was going to suggest that maybe that was just a visual cue for the audience, but the kids can see it, and so can Mr. Simpson, who is easily the second oldest character in the movie. So yeah, this is just bad filmmaking. And the longer this movie goes on, I'm really starting to question the Banshee hates everything green thing from the summary. Because I'm seeing quite a bit of green, of varying shades, throughout the house and this dinner scene, and she doesn't seem too bothered by any of it. She definitely hates trees, though. The movie was very clear on that point. The movie gets back to Finn, who, is in this movie surprisingly infrequently, given how it's named after him. But anyway, it gets back to him as he tries to sabotage the construction equipment again, but sets off a tripwire that leads to a photo being snapped of him. When the Banshee sees it, she's ecstatic because it means there will be gold. A bunch of business people show up to the house for a big meeting, and it's here we learn about the Banshee's long-term plans, and it involves flooding the local valley in order to create a hydroelectric dam. Or at least that's how she and the father present it to the businessmen. Obviously, that's not her true motive. This will benefit her more, even though how is not quite clear yet. Yet, spoiler alert, large bodies of water make her more powerful. I mean, she's literally living on an island. She could just go to the coast and... I'm trying to find the logic in a Paul Matthews movie. That way lies madness. When the meeting ends, several of the businessmen at the meeting are quite appalled with the plan for the dam, considering the loss of animal life and loss of forest it would cause. This, of course, is the least believable part of the movie. I mean, wealthy capitalists actually caring about deer and rabbits over profit? The Banshee's levitation powers are more credible. A ticking clock gets added to the plot as Finn, with the help of Ethel and Tommy, have to flee his home, but because he didn't have time to take more than a handful of gold with him, by the time they've escaped the tunnel that doubles as the back entrance, he's already started to get a little bigger. Well, he says so anyway. The film isn't showing us that. Not yet, anyway. And the father learns that his fiancée is a banshee in a rather anticlimactic way. Her spell on him starts to wear off, so she just uses her power in front of him, declaring she doesn't need him anymore because she has leprechaun gold. That's really it. I don't think my words can convey how little weight there is to this reveal. The father, and also Mary, underreact to this reveal, as I just hinted, and Ethel has no reaction whatsoever, at first anyway, when she sees the Banshee literally turn her father and Mary into a puddle of water. They get better. Anyway, David Warner has the closest thing to a normal reaction to that scene, even though it's just him nervously shuffling to one side while the Banshee rants about flooding the valley. Later on, underneath the house, the Banshee gives a speech to a rather quickly reconstituted, what was the father's name again? Henry? Something like that? Whatever. The speech to the father that's kind of hypocritical, lambasting humanity for cutting down forests, which she was doing herself. And now I'm wondering if the writer changed her motivation partway through the writing process and then just forgot to go back and edit the earlier parts. But after this, she of course gets defeated after Simpson turns on her. Not a full face turn, mind you. He just wants to rule the world himself. And now that he has his own bag of leprechaun gold, long story, he thinks he can beat the Banshee. It almost works. Yeah, he ends up getting turned into ice and then exploded. And then the Banshee herself explodes a little bit later, taking the possessed body with her, so that's kind of dark. I think all we really knew about her was her real name, because that's the name the Banshee uses when she gets engaged to Tommy and Ethel's father. Well, anyway, I'm not really sure why this happened. Something about leprechaun gold being based on life, and she couldn't... I don't get it. Look, she just screams while holding 2 bags of leprechaun gold for a bit. There's some lightning and an earthquake, then kaboom. Tommy and Ethel manage to save Finn once this happens by picking up the gold that fell on the ground after the Banshee exploded. You know, the kids and their father reconcile. You know, obviously he and Mary are in love now. The end. The last scene was either a sign that the Banshee was gone for good, or it was sequel bait. I honestly couldn't tell. Or care. Random thoughts I had while watching the movie. This is the 60th movie I have watched for this show. It says a lot about how thin the results on Google image search are for a movie when I'm resorting to pictures from the Internet Movie Car database. For some reason, Letterboxd didn't bother to list Tommy's actor in the main cast. Ouch. David Warner's only real character trait in this movie is being annoyed. While it is part of the plot, i.e. he wanted to control the Banshee, not have to work for her, I imagine given how bad the comedy in this script is, he wasn't acting, he was just not bothering to hide the fact that he was here for the paycheck. Still a step up from the zero energy performance from the Little Unicorn, but we'll be getting to that one later this season. Unfortunately. I must admit, I am impressed that despite taking place near a farm, I didn't see a single animal poop joke in this movie. Remarkable restraint. Quite a bit of mud, but no animal poop. The kid actors in this movie weren't great, but you could tell they were having fun at least, so I can't bring myself to be too critical of them. And I'm already, as I've said before, inclined to cut child actors more slack than I do adult actors. Every time Finn does or attempts to do his invisibility trick, he looks like someone trying to force a fart. For a movie that takes place in Ireland and relies on Irish mythology, it's probably not great that I think at most only half of the cast of characters with dialogue actually are Irish. Or maybe that's just me. And now it is time for this episode's FUJK. So the Harry Potter series has a lot of fat phobia in it. I mean, like, pretty much every fat character in the books is described in less than flattering ways. And on top of that, they're with maybe one or two exceptions. I don't remember exactly. It's been forever, and I'm not rereading that shit now, that's for sure. Every fat character is either evil or so painfully naive that they are easily manipulated by evil. I'm totally serious, by the way. I mean, the Dursleys are vicious bullies. Hagrid is over-emotional and dumb. The Weasley matriarch, controlling, overprotective. I could go on and on, really. I mean, again, compared to some stuff that's going to come up in future installments, this is on the low end, but still kind of gross. Like, I could be wrong, but I think in both the books and the movies, Neville didn't get to have, like, his big hero moment until after he'd lost a bunch of weight. So, like, yikes. And and keep in mind, I am far from the only person to notice this. In fact, I'm going to be honest, I didn't really notice it at all until some other people talking about the series, like on Tumblr and Twitter and other social media outlets, mentioned it. And then I'm like, oh. Yeah, it's one of those things that you just don't see when you're reading a book or watching a movie until someone points it out to you, and then you kind of feel dumb for not having noticed it. I mean, I'm sure we all have stuff like that, you know? But yeah, now it's time for the final verdict. This movie will definitely rank higher than The Magic Door in the final rankings. I can tell you that much. Veronica Hamill as the Banshee is truly this movie's saving grace. I don't think any Paul Matthews movie I have seen, either in total or in a Diamanda Hagen review, has had a villain this entertaining. Granted, she wasn't consistently entertaining through the whole thing, which is a negative, but when the script and or director allowed her to really camp it up, this movie became quite watchable. Which may sound like faint praise, but remember, this is a Paul Matthews movie we're talking about here. Watchable is enough to make this an early contender for the Best in Set title this season. I'm willing to bet the fact that he wasn't behind the camera for this one helped. Unfortunately, next movie, I've not seen it, but I have seen a review of it. So, this is gonna hurt. Next time, Merlin the Return. Have fun. Stay safe.